Units in southern Dimhov would dig in for the rest of the operation as they had completed their objectives. Subsequently, NFA armored columns began moving into Western Dremkhov on November 15th. A Novoroshian mascot appeared among the troops. He was nicknamed Natman. NFA troops found the mascot to be humorous, and it kept morale high. Seeing this, the separatists decided to adopt their own mascot called Biederman, which they found to be funny. These mascots didn't just serve as rear echelon entertainment, they actually saw combat. Natman wielded PKM, rode with troops, and participated in assaults with the 18th Ground Assault Brigade. Biederman, on the other hand, fired RPGs at NFA positions. An NFA column stopped next to some destroyed buildings. Everyone stayed together at first, picking off targets from afar until an 18th GAB squad that Natman was a part of was ordered to seize an empty trench line to the east, where they spent the rest of the day. The T-72 repositioned to the northeast and didn't use its main gun at all, instead opting to use its PKT and Dushka mounted machine guns.
A BSM assault squad tries to retake the trench line, but as they were crossing the road, they immediately came under fire and inevitably they all perished.
Second Squadron, which was part of the 18th Ground Assault Brigade, performed reconnaissance behind enemy lines, getting into frequent firefights with separatists which eventually led their Tiger M being disabled by an RPG. A Serbian volunteer in the squad called Basher went to the burning Tiger, got on its AGS with which he killed 2 separatists and held off an assault group all by himself. After the AGS ran out of ammo, he ditched it and switched to an RPG with which he killed 3 separatists with a well-placed shot. Rogov also moved east and attacked the trench head-on without proper support, which resulted in heavy casualties. Even the cameraman was killed, and the footage you're seeing right now was recovered by another Rogovite. Nonetheless, they seized it after a few minutes of fighting. Later, they realized that a handful of Rogovites wouldn't be enough to hold the trench, and reinforcements weren't available that day, so they left at night. Finally, the most notable event of this day was the surrender of a Rogovite, Ahmad Marinov. Prior to this, Ahmad convinced himself that defecting to the BSM would be good for him, and when no one was looking, he left the base, crossed an open field without getting shot, and upon reaching the other side, he surrendered immediately. One fighter noticed this and named it Makarov Adam. Ahmad panicked, but managed to explain that he wanted to defect. So the fighter radioed in his squad leader, who didn't notice Ahmad as he was looking through his binoculars. Then, along with another fighter, confronted Ahmad. The squad leader told him, "Ну чё, мужик, пойдём со мной?" "Okay, man. Come on, get up. Let's go." He was led to a tree line behind the enemy trench, where there was also a T-72. The squad leader instructed him to lie down behind it for a blessing. Ahmad complied and was subsequently crushed to death. News of the surrender attempt spread quickly among both NFA and BSM members. A Bryansk fighter named Petrenko jokingly said, "Rogovцы никогда не сдаются. Rogovites never surrender." A few days later, his body was found in a ditch. Commander of Rogov, Artyom Zalesov, visited it and said, "Ahmad, у тебя отбирают роговские привилегии. Роговцы никогда не сдаются. Ahmad, your Rogov privileges are being taken away. Rogovites never surrender." In the morning of November 16th, an NFA armored column was moving towards the front line. The vehicles in front were Teutonic Tiger M and T-72, whilst the rear vehicles were 2 Rogovite BMP-2s. Initially, Rogov stayed behind while Teutonics took up 4 positions, but later, Rogov moved up and dismounted a tree line in the north where they were soon engaged with separatists. Although they were supported by 2 BMPs, they still took heavy casualties due to accurate small arms fire. They also failed in preventing an RPG team from flanking them, which led to the destruction of one of the BMP-2s and a second one being damaged.
Also,
take a left, take a left, no, take a left, take a left, take a left, take a left, take a left.
enemy tank 220.
I see a guy with like a helmet. I don't know if
Reverse.
The situation was only stabilized when the second squadron arrived to reinforce them, and subsequently the last BMP-2 was left for repairs. Despite nearly being killed, the crew of the BMP-2 went back and fought alongside the infantry well into the night.
There's like a squad of 7, bang 230.
Novo-Russian soldiers mostly used the MR Flora, MN14, VSR-93, and KCS camo patterns. However, on November 17th, members of the 2nd Squadron received new camouflage uniforms as a donation from the Smolensk Animal Hunting Association, which the Recon Squadron very proudly showed off. On this day, a Bryansk BMP-1 was destroyed. Its burning carcass was recorded by a member of 2nd Squadron and by an off-dock quadcopter.
Oh my god, Radin, shut the fuck up, you're so loud, Radin! Oh my god, he's so fucking loud, how do I turn him down? Holy shit!
BMP-1's down? Yep. Excellent. Excellent. It's starting to rust? Okay.
Multiple NFA squads were tasked with seizing a trench line. One such squad was led by Buran of the 18th Assault Brigade. His squad consisted of 6 infantrymen, including himself. A BMP-2 operated by 2 crewmen, a journalist and a Rogovite who got lost. When pushing towards the trench line, the squad was under constant small arms fire and multiple RPGs were fired at the BMP-2. The squad stopped by a mound to provide suppressive fire so other squads could push up as well. During this, a soldier named Taras Antonov was shot and killed. Despite this loss, the squad still reached the trench line. Its previous occupants were eliminated whilst trying to retreat. One RPG did hit the engine block, but it miraculously kept on going and would do so for the rest of the day. The NFA held this trench line for the whole day, and any separatists trying to reinforce it were eliminated. On one occasion, a group of separatists seemed to be literally chased away by 30mm tracers. A separatist T-72 nicknamed Bryansk Babe, manned by Sonder as commander, Noy as gunner, and Magya as the driver. Their T-72 was hidden in a tree line, and it was so well hidden that they managed to destroy an NFA T-72 and later a BMP-2 without being seen or fired back on. Later on, each member of the tank crew was awarded the Cross of St. George First Class for their actions.
Saber, get some footage of their trenches. Get some footage of their cleared out trenches.
The ammo bags give RPG rounds too.
He has a toolkit.
Oh yeah, pilfering.
This is Dremkhov City, but to avoid confusion with the region and for the sake of brevity, it will be referred to as the city or the town.
Dramov was finally within the NFA's reach, and they wasted no time assaulting it.
I've already killed about 4 people.
Initially, BMP-2s only went to the outskirts because at the time sending armored vehicles in was considered too risky.
40 muzzle flash? What? Seriously?
Yeah, a big muzzle flash.
Artyom Zelesov had Rogov infantry guard the northern flank and sent a BMP-2 to hit the city from the northwest. On the other hand, the 18th Ground Assault Brigade sent DRGs to infiltrate the city itself, one of which was led by John. His squad consisted of no more than 5 soldiers, and as they were approaching it from the west, they encountered a small group of separatists occupying a trench. They reacted quickly, laying down accurate suppressive fire, using their scoped weapons to land headshots, and further overwhelming the defenders with RPGs. The defenders couldn't hold out for more than a few minutes, and were eventually made into Cargo 200. Afterwards, the DRG continued to move towards the city, where they, along with the other squads, met stiffer opposition. The Novo-Russians were forced into a game of hide-and-seek, in which they were lured into apartments where separatists were waiting for them. At the same time, they also had to deal with exterior threats.
Oh, go back long. Clear.
House,
Outside the building right now.
What floor are you guys on?
Second floor. Here, where? Oh!
2nd Squadron presumably contested the southwestern portion of the city, while John contested the northwestern portion, but in the end, it was too much for the DRGs, and they were forced to retreat. Following this, NFA High Command reassessed their options on how to attack the city. The next day, assaults on the town intensified. A column of 2 T-72s and 2 BMP-2s from the 18th Ground Assault Brigade were involved. The rear T-72 was manned by Gunner Volkov, driver Kovalev, and Commander Ruslan, thus it will be referred to as Ruslan's T-72. The Russian artillery had softened up the town beforehand, but ironically it made things more difficult because the debris that littered the streets made movement an absolute nightmare for these war machines. Someone could be hiding behind them, and no one would know until it was too late. Suddenly, the rear BMP-2 was hit by 2 RPGs, causing an ammunition cook-off that killed everyone inside. The other vehicles reacted quickly and laid down suppressive fire whilst infantry dismounted from the front BMP-2. As soon as the last man dismounted, the front T-72's left hull was penetrated by a tandem round, causing the ammo carousel to cook off, sending the turret flying 100 meters high. Ruslan's T-72 was also hit, specifically in the engine block. Kovalev got out of his compartment with an AK-74M. He spotted the separatist who had just hit the tank and shot him dead while he was trying to reload his RPG. He then took one look at the engine and knew that it could not be recovered. As the front BMP-2 and troops exchanged fire with the separatists, Kovalev told his commander Ruslan over the radio about the engine being quote-unquote kaput and encouraged him to dismount because if he stayed in, they would all die. Ruslan agrees before radioing the remaining BMP-2 about their intentions, and also climbed out with his AKM whilst Volkov kept firing. Once Ruslan was out, Volkov fired one more fragmentation round and deployed all the smoke launchers before dismounting with his AK-74M. Using the smoke screen as concealment, each member of the tank crew safely made it to the BMP-2. When they came, the troops mounted up. The tankers, however, had to lay down on top of the hull as there weren't enough seats inside. A smoke screen was deployed, and they all retreated as a hail of ammunition flew past them. The NFA did not launch any more assaults that day, which gave the separatists a chance to do a quick photo shoot with the destroyed vehicles. One of the photos included Nikita Voronov, in which the front T-72 and Ruslan's T-72 are visible. Later on, the vehicles were taken as war trophies and towed away by separatist T-72s. By November 20th, Novorussian soldiers started wearing winter camouflage as snow had just fallen. Squad Gnome of the Rogov Brigade made an incursion into the city's northern flank. Members of Gnome communicated in English rather than Russian, as most of them were foreigners. The squad leader, Bonov, was German, Otter and Redis were Ukrainians, Srivijaya and Dayak were Indonesians, Pokel was American, Nord was Swedish, and Max was Dutch. Each member wore Gnome patches for easy identification. Units like Gnome that consisted of foreigners weren't unusual for Rogov. As far back as 2002, there was the infamous Imam Ali Martyr Brigade, which saw action in Dramov.
Okay, that's good enough. Let's go.
Inshallah.
No way.
Inshallah.
Gnome Squad's mission that day was recorded by Srivijaya's GoPro, and so everything here is based off of that footage. That being said, the earliest recorded point of their mission was them moving through a trench at the northern tip of a tree line that was closest to the city, and then making the risky move east to cross an open field. But it seems that they didn't suffer any casualties while crossing. They stopped at an abandoned trench line northeast of the city, where they spotted a pickup truck equipped with an SPG-9 recoilless rifle. The pickup, however, did not notice the Rogovites, because if it did, it would have parked 200 meters away and sniped them with the SPG. As it was driving in a northwestern direction, Tony asked, "Do we engage?" Bonov answered with no. Suddenly, the pickup truck got stuck in a trench as the field was bumpy and the driver didn't see it. Tony points this out and says that he can spray them now, but before Bonov could respond, the pickup's SPG gunner panicked and fired into the ground instead of at the Rogovites. At that moment, all members of the squad opened fire. One of them managed to hit it with an RPG, causing it to burn. Then Srivijaya pushed up and threw a grenade. Afterwards, a separatist appeared right in front of him, but instead of killing him, the separatist hit Tony, so Srivijaya returns fire and kills the separatist. Thankfully, Tony's plate stopped the bullet, and he was able to continue fighting. Bonov and Otter went to the burning pickup truck. Bonov said, "Srivijaya, take a group picture quickly, we haven't got the time."
Where's Otter? Quickly, Saber, quickly, we don't have time. We haven't the time. Okay, good. Let's go. Archer, let's go back to the position.
After this engagement, Gnome's squad continued their mission in the northern flank of the city, which was mostly recorded by Surijai's GoPro.
Aim a little high. You're fucking aiming too high. Further to the right, further to the right, further to the right.
Make sure the bullet goes over his head so it suppresses him. If it goes short, it won't do shit.
Orderly also changed faces, shaved his beard, and wore a green balaclava, whilst waiting for Ard or someone else in the squad to TP him. After some time in the north, the decision was made to enter the city, which was done by occupying an abandoned school on the outskirts. They moved there in a single file line whilst under fire. At the same time, Tawny and Indo were positioned outside to act as forward observers, presumably at the trench where they ambushed the pickup truck. Unbeknownst to them, they had just stirred up the hornet's nest, and a large number of nearby separatists promptly attacked their position.
Engaged by an enemy LMG.
Grenade! Wait, fuck! Get out! I swear to the Fuck!
Hey, they're pushing for water tower.
Oh my god, Ard! There is a fucking invasion force coming to you. They're everywhere. They're everywhere, man. Oh my god.
Everywhere!
There's at least a 10-man squad pushing you. We're also being pushed.
Shoot at the water tower.
We can't. We're being suppressed by LMG. Don't try.
Coming up the stairs, watch out, coming up the stairs. What the fuck?
Are there
Pop up like it's nothing.
That's me usually again.
Gnome squad had become too confident and pushed their luck and was wiped out at the school for it. By the end, Max, Pokal, Tony, Indo, Nord, and Srivijaya had perished, leaving only Otter and the critically wounded Bonov to link up with a different Rogov squad at a trench they had previously occupied. When they retreated to that trench, Otter recovered Srivijaya's GoPro and mounted it on his helmet, which is how Srivijaya's footage was saved. By nightfall, the Rogovites were resting back at base, and the positions they occupied returned to the grey zone. When Gnome squad was fighting up north, the 1st Squadron of the 18th Ground Assault Brigade pushed into the town itself, while 2nd Squadron covered the southern flank. During this assault, 1st Squadron was supported by a BMP-2. The BMP-2 mostly stuck in the southeastern outskirts to avoid RPGs. There, it fired long bursts from its autocannon, and the suppression was effective enough that 1st Squadron was able to push deeper into the town, which also created a slight buffer between the Separatists and the BMP-2. To the south, 2nd Squadron led by Redeemies occupied part of a tree line with the Tiger AGS. Here, they suppressed and sniped Separatists on the other side. At one point, they moved into the field and took cover behind some scrap metal walls where there used to be a power line. This is probably done so they could observe enemy positions better, because it was foggy at the time. In this footage, you can see the unfortunate fate of a BSM rifleman. Next to him is another dead Separatist who was killed earlier. 1st Squadron's BMP-2 quickly became the target of RPG teams, but unlike the previous armored assault, there was no column to rigidly follow, so the BMP-2 could move more freely to avoid hits. The Separatists, however, quickly adapted to this fact and managed to land a heat round, forcing the vehicle to retreat for repairs. BSM RPG teams expected the BMP-2 to return, and when it did, it didn't last very long. It was hit once, prompting the driver to reposition, and when he stopped, it was destroyed with a second hit that erupted the engine block, causing it to burn from the inside. This loss was compensated by the presence of 2nd Squadron, which aided them in clearing out multiple apartment blocks. In the end, 2nd Squadron and 1st Squadron had successfully cleared the eastern section of the city from Separatists.
Kill the whites.
Does this nigga know? They took the fucking block. Does he know? Ring. Who else?
Oh shit! There they are! Fuck him up!
Coming in from the left.
I'm pushing! I'm throwing a grenade.
By November 22nd, it became apparent that the offensive had slowed down to a snail's pace, as the past 3 days were spent trying to capture the city. Furthermore, NFAI Command came to the realization that from here onwards, they would have to mostly use light infantry assaults instead of the typical mechanized assaults, because the Rasputitsa was making it extremely difficult for armor to arrive, and without adequate support, casualties were going to mount up. With these factors in mind, it was decided to let aviation and artillery flatten the town. This would free infantry squads from the task of room clearing, which would in theory speed up progress. In preparation for that, all units pulled out of the city on November 22nd. The next day, Bombardment began, which would last until November 24th.
On the second day of shelling, November 24th, a pair of Su-24s took off from Smolensk Severny at night. These Soviet planes were modified to accept American-made Ad-Fleer targeting pods and other NATO equipment. They flew towards Dramov at an altitude of 5,000 meters above sea level, and when the planes were within 15 kilometers of Dimhov, they deployed 4 GBU-10 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs on the buildings that were suspected of sheltering separatists. The bombs were successful in bringing down the buildings, and the Su-24s landed safely back at Smolensk Severny.
Between November 23rd and November 24th, around 520 artillery shells and 13 airborne munitions were spent on the town, the remnants of which now remain as a sort of no man's land between NFA and BSM lines. The only part that was mostly intact were the trenches in the center, which would become the primary focus for both sides. On November 25th, the NFA launched their final assault. Once again, Teutonics made up the 1st and 2nd squadrons would attack frontally from the west, while Rogov would flank around the north and eventually link up with Teutonics in the city. Members of both 1st and 2nd squadrons attacked the city center, which was only defended by a few separatists who weren't able to hold for long. The Teutonics then took up positions in the trenches and defended it from counterattacks. In the northeast, Rogov attacked the city using the same route from a few days ago. However, there were already separatists there waiting to halt them. Both squads faced off against each other at a set of trenches. Here, the Rogovites adopted a more defensive posture, opting to stay in their trench. The separatists were different, however, and without covering fire, decided to go on the attack and were stopped halfway through. Now pinned down in the open ground, they were soon eliminated one by one. When there was only one left, the Rogovites came out of the trench and killed him too. At this point, the Rogovites seemed to be divided into 3-man and 7-man fire teams, and they continued to follow Gnome Squad's footsteps while under constant enemy fire. The smaller fire team was pinned down by a relatively close BSM squad. Then, the 7-man fire team tried to reinforce them, but half of it was caught out in the open, which resulted in 2 deaths. Soon, they slowed down to a halt, and by then another member was killed. They also started getting shelled. The squad leader looked at the situation and feared that they would be wiped out if they stayed any longer, so he made the decision to retreat. Later, it was discovered that no fire mission was ever called in by either side. Instead, the explosions came from undetonated NFA artillery shells. Later, Rogov attempted to flank again through a slightly different route, where the only separatist in the way was barely conscious and was swiftly eliminated. Afterwards, the Rogovites pivoted right towards the city's rear flank. Unfortunately for them, Bryansk forces had already seized the middle trenches, meaning they were now stuck between BSM reinforcements and dug-in separatists instead of vice versa. These Rogovites didn't last very long. 10 minutes later, a counterattack by a different Rogov squad from the west retook the center. But not 7 minutes later, Bryansk forces pushed them back and even entered the western section. However, this leakage was quickly patched by Rogov and 18th, forcing them to fall back. Bryansk held the trenches for some 20 minutes, which is by far the longest either side has controlled the center for. Once again, the NFA launched another counterattack. This time, it was spearheaded by members of 18th Ground Assault Brigade, who were successful in seizing the trenches. Some separatists tried to wrap around the dug-in Teutonics, but were unsuccessful as the flanks were covered by Rogovites. At this point, commanders of both the Rogov Brigade and 18th Ground Assault Brigade had been sending the very last soldiers that they could spare into the city for hours now, and these soldiers were utterly exhausted from the fighting, which reached a level of intensity where bodies were piling up, and these bodies had to be pulled out to the sides so that soldiers could move in the trenches. So by afternoon, all NFA units in the city were ordered to fall back as their commanders realized how futile further assaults would be due to limited resources, manpower, and the enemy's stubborn defense. After the withdrawal, the city was shelled momentarily, and finally, Bryansk forces shot a propaganda video celebrating their successful defense of the city. After November 25th, the front line froze again and returned to static warfare.
Victory!
The following data is made up of visually confirmed vehicle losses and casualties that were counted manually after reviewing all the combat videos and pictures that I had gathered. This data does not include November 21st till 24th because the Novorussians were flattening the city, so actual combat was stopped for a while. Finally, discrepancies in the data are marginal and shouldn't matter all that much. In terms of vehicle losses, the NFA lost 19 armored vehicles over 10 days. This demonstrates the effectiveness of BSM RPG and SPG teams. The only day when no vehicle was lost was on November 18th. These losses are one of the reasons why both 18th and Rogov weren't using heavy armor in Romanovsk in January 2014. On the other hand, Bryansk only lost 6 vehicles of all types, which is unsurprising given that BSM is far less mechanized than NFA. For casualties, the NFA lost 142 men, 67 of which were Rogovites and 59 were Teutonics. And then there's 15 casualties, which I've labeled as unknown NFA because it's uncertain what unit they belong to. Now, unlike the NFA with its green armbands indicating Teutonics and orange armbands for Rogov, all BSM members wore white armbands, so I was not able to divide BSM casualties by which unit they belonged to. With that said, the BSM lost 173 men over 10 days, which is 31 more men than NFA's 142. This gives us a kill-to-death ratio of 1.21 separatists per Novorussian soldier killed, which in my opinion is marginal and is compensated by the significant armored losses that were inflicted by the BSM. The previous kill-to-death ratio that I calculated was 1.34, which again is marginal. About 315 men died over 10 days, and when the unknown infantry are added, it brings us to approximately 334 men killed in total, accompanied by 24 vehicles of all types destroyed. It should be noted that the average casualty count in these 10 days was 33.4. On November 20th, there were 24 confirmed deaths, and this number rose 4 times on the final day to 106 confirmed deaths, because much of the fighting was concentrated on the middle trenches. This means that November 25th makes up 31% of the total casualty count, making it the deadliest day during the offensive for both sides. Novorus had planned to impress its NATO partners and citizens with a swift victory. However, Bryansk commanders like Nikita Voronov turned it into a meat grinder that resulted in the destruction of 57% of estimated available armor and 15% casualties, making the operation unsustainable for 18th and Rogov. The BSM, on the other hand, sustained 173 deaths out of 2,500 men, or a measly 6.9% of the combined manpower of the 332nd Infantry Brigade, Bimbas Circus Group, and Rodonian Volunteer Stormtroopers. And the vehicle losses were far lighter at just 15%, or 6 out of 39 vehicles of all types. In conclusion, the November Dremkhov offensive resulted in the capture of most of Dremkhov, fulfilling a majority of the Novorussian Federal Army's objectives, but at a tremendously heavy cost, which made it a Pyrrhic victory for the Novorussians. Despite losing Dremkhov, it can be said that the battle was a strategic victory for the Bryansk separatist movement, as both 18th and Rogov struggled to replace the armor that they lost in Dremkhov for many months. And in January 2014, in Romanovsk, they were forced to use only Tiger M and Humvees for assaults, which made fighting easier for the separatists.